It's all about matters of the heart. Hi, I'm NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. Welcome to StationLIFE. The focus of today's show is on matters of the heart as they relate to good cardiovascular health. We'll take a look at how NASA keeps astronauts' hearts healthy off the Earth. And we'll take a look at some of the research being done aboard the International Space Station that can keep all of us healthier here on the Earth.
Houston on 2 for velocity confirmation. Go ahead and lead steps 4, 5, and 4, 6. We're moving on to step 5.
You want to go right now for that activity?
Copy. Thank you.
Okay, Tracy, we copy, and that's good information. We'll pass it along.
Cardiovascular disease, including heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure, is the #1 killer of men and women across America. Fortunately, many studies have shown that healthy habits, including good nutrition and exercise, are important for maintaining a healthy heart here on Earth. Those habits are even more important for astronauts on the International Space Station. Living in microgravity for 6 months changes our bodies in a number of ways. Without gravity, we lose bone mineral density, our muscles atrophy, and our cardiovascular system gets weaker. Some of our studies have shown that in space, the size and shape of our hearts may actually change, which could make it difficult to do our jobs when we get back to Earth or even land on Mars. On Earth, our heart and blood vessels are well adapted to work against the downward pull of gravity. In space, however, there's a tendency for blood and other bodily fluids to accumulate in the upper body. Let's take a look at one of the consequences of this fluid shift.
We have recently identified that some astronauts experience changes in their vision, which might be related to the cardiovascular system. Our hearts pump blood around our body through blood vessels. Special adaptations in our bodies ensure that fluid is evenly distributed despite the pull of gravity. In space, astronauts no longer experience the downward pull of gravity, and the fluid in their bodies tends to move towards the upper body and the head. Our cranium is a rigid container. As the fluid moves towards the head, it causes the pressure inside the skull to rise. This is known as increased intracranial pressure. The optic nerve travels from the brain to the eye. The increased pressure from the cranium travels down the nerve and affects the eye. It causes the optic nerve to be squeezed and the optic disc, where the optic nerve meets the eye, to swell. The back of the eyeball flattens as pressure builds behind it, and the blood vessels in the back of the eyeball also swell. These changes can affect the astronaut's vision. One change is that the astronauts become farsighted. A second change is that they can develop cotton wool spots, which represent damage of the nerve fibers in the back of the eye. These can cause discrete areas of vision loss. NASA is working to understand and prevent these changes in astronauts, which may also help us understand and prevent related vision changes here on Earth.
One of the tools we have to study heart health aboard the space station is an ultrasound device, which uses harmless sound waves to take images of the inside of our bodies. Those images can be viewed at the same time by researchers and doctors in mission control. With minimal training on the ultrasound, remote guidance techniques developed by NASA enabled astronauts to take detailed images of their own heart. In our next segment, we'll travel to a small community in Brazil that has benefited from remote medicine techniques that were advanced by the research aboard the International Space Station.
Minas Gerais é estado.
Minas Gerais is a large state.
Nosso território tem
Our territory is about the size of France, and we consist of 853 units and municipalities.
grandes distâncias.
There are large distances between our communities and many very isolated rural communities.
Nós estamos utilizando a nova tecnologia.
We are using new technology that impacts the quality of prenatal care and the diagnostic capacity of the primary care doctor in these situations involving distant, isolated communities.
Providing medical care for people in remote locations like distant rural communities or the International Space Station, can be difficult because trained medical personnel are not always available. NASA research teams develop techniques that enable astronauts aboard the space station with minimal training to operate an ultrasound device using simple printed guides. The ultrasound images are transmitted in real time to a doctor back on Earth, who can make medical decisions without actually being aboard the station. These same techniques have been adapted for use with portable ultrasound devices in communities where expert medical care is not always available.
We are also incorporating the first aid and emergency care components, improving first aid at the scene of the accident and enabling the use of ultrasound to communicate to the medical communication center. In the ambulance, we can use ultrasound in various situations. In those situations where time really matters, in which you have little time to make decisions. The idea of using ultrasound for healthcare is like an extension of the physical examination. You are able to conduct the exam with much more detail. And you can use it at the time to make a decision, or you can use telemedicine platforms to obtain a second opinion from someone at a distance. My name is Joaquim Diniz. I'm a doctor in the town of Manga. In Manga, people live with a particularity, and that is isolation. We have a geographical barrier, that is the São Francisco River, which is both a blessing for the region, but it also isolates us. We live in a region where financial resources are few. People do not have a lot of work, but they are honest, good people who do not have much opportunity. So there are many needy people who need these resources and rely only on this institution to provide assistance. This is a technology that helps us solve many problems. That was the case of a patient who came to the hospital with severe respiratory failure, and the people realized she would die in just 20 to 30 minutes. We talked with Dr. Parzelli, who was training us to use the ultrasound. He came and applied the ultrasound and discovered large amounts of fluid around her lungs and heart. We performed the procedure and drained a lot of fluids. In 10 minutes, the woman immediately experienced an improvement and in half an hour was already walking. It was like a miracle, a rise and walk. She was dying in front of us without people knowing what was happening. This ultrasound was instrumental in saving the life of that patient.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, space geeks from all over the world, we have with us today a real treat. Dr. Koichi Wakata from the Japanese Space Agency and absolutely one of my favorite astronauts. Actually, in fact, wait a minute. I have a list right here, and I want to prove it. Look, Koichi.
Oh, great note.
TC's top 10 heroes of space travel. Look.
Wow!
He's on there. Welcome, Koichi.
Good to see you, Tracy, here.
Nice to see you, too. Thank you for joining us on StationLIFE.
My pleasure. I'm always watching your program.
Really?
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, wow. Did you hear that? I am so excited that I'm actually honored that you watch our show. It's all about the space station, you know.
Yes. Yes, this is wonderful to be able to explain how wonderful it is to work and live on board the space station.
Yes.
And then today, what are we talking about?
Today we're talking about cardiovascular health.
Awesome.
Yes. And you know a thing or two about that?
Yes, we do exercise pretty much every day.
I was going to ask you on board, did you work out every single day?
I did, because it's not only, to keep, my body healthy, but also it's a very important psychological, I think, relaxation for me. And then the best part of the exercise is the, what is that? The ARED device that we have on board.
Yeah.
It's just sitting right next to the cupola windows. It's probably the best view gym in the entire world, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can do the, muscle strengthening exercise, and at the same time you can see this beautiful, home planet. And what a wonderful place.
That's right, because we have the cupola and we have that big center window. We call it Window 7. And then most days, because the space station is oriented with the belly of the space station facing the Earth, which means that the cupola windows are facing the Earth. And there we are on the ARED, above it, below, however you want, whatever your perspective is. But anyways, we're right in line looking out that window, which seems to us like we're on a bench, we're doing our bench press, and we're looking out that window. And I remember doing my exercise one day, and I saw red soil go by, and I'm like, that's Australia!
Exactly.
So
Yes.
you can practice geography at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about Sprint and what that was all about?
Right, Sprint exercise, a new protocol, and already several astronauts have tried that method. And basically, it uses the prescription of like a higher intensity of exercise, but less volume or less number of exercise days. For example, like if I onboard the space station 7 years ago, I pretty much exercised like running for 40 minutes in the same pace. But here, as far as cardiovascular is concerned, we have like a sprint running, like for 30 seconds sprint, and 15 seconds rest, another 30 seconds of run. But it's only like 6 or 7 minutes, very short interval, but high intensity training. And you do that like 3 times a week instead of 7 days a week.
Wow.
And so it's like a smaller number of days of exercise, but the higher intensity. And that's part of the sprint protocol. So 7 years ago, when I was on board the space station, I used the previous protocol, which I exercise every day. But this time, it's a smaller amount of time actually, but the results were pretty good. I was able to walk right after landing, and so I think this new protocol is working very well.
Wow, so if you compared when you were on board and landed 7 years ago to now, when you did this new protocol and you exercised more and you had probably more emphasis on the exercise because you have more equipment to work with. A big difference, did you notice?
As for after landing, I don't see very much difference. So that means that's such a very efficient way to do exercise, because if the results are the same, if you spend less time and exercise, that means it's a very efficient way of exercising. So maybe we can utilize that in the future when we go to, beyond low Earth orbit, when we go to Mars, and then, so a lot of new protocols are being tested on board the station.
Yeah, and I can see where folks back here at home who don't have time to exercise, pay attention to this, because you can spend less time working out and get the same benefits as if you were working out for 2 hours or something.
Right.
And you have done just a tremendous amount of work, Koichi, not just in your most recent increment, but throughout your career in the space program, and you've been an asset to Japan and to NASA and to the International Space Station and to StationLIFE. So thank you so much for being here with us, spending so much time sharing your stories. We've just had a lot of fun with you. So wish you all the best as we go forward. I'll see you, probably in 5 minutes, but, thank you so much for being here with us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, Tracy.
Likewise.
Glad to be here.
Cool.
Just curious.
I think they can actually put ice in here.
Yeah, depending on how much water pressure we have that day. We can do 16 to any now, and pretty much any time. If we have good water pressure, we can get you up to around 80. But you're saying Tracy's taking all the problems.
You're not asking
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Trying to get with confidence.
Indeed.
So with all this exercise going on, is it really working? Researchers and ACERs, who are astronaut strength conditioning and rehabilitation specialists, have made great progress. Before we had a full gym on the space station, our astronauts needed quite a bit of recovery time back here on Earth. Today, our astronauts are coming home in excellent health.
My name is Mark Williams. I'm the lead astronaut strength and conditioning coach. On board at the International Space Station, we have 3 pieces of hardware. We have a cycle, which we call CVIS. We have a treadmill, which is called T2, and we have a resistive exercise device, which is called ARED. And each device is specifically designed to do certain things for the astronaut. We try to do one of those particular devices every other day. One of them we're going to get a little bit better cardiovascular fitness out of it. The other one we get a little bit more impact loading, like running on the ground. So that affects muscle, it'll affect a little bit of bone, does things. Those are the physiological aspects of it. But then also making sure when they come home from a 6-month flight that they don't come home like a bowl of Jell-O. You know, they're going to lose muscle, they're going to lose strength, they're going to lose bone, they're going to lose cardiovascular fitness. But at the same time, then we have to take them, get them back to where they were before they left, which is what we do in our post-flight period once they come home for about 6 to 8 weeks. And just get them prepared back to normal life, you know, doing their job, doing with their family, doing yard work, whatever that happens to be.
Have you ever been sedentary for a long period of time, like lying in bed for a week because of an illness or surgery, and then stood up quickly? Did you feel like you might fall or that not all your senses were functioning? Hi, I'm Dr. John Charles with NASA's Human Research Program. During the 1-year International Space Station mission, NASA will conduct functional studies to gain insight into key physiological factors that contribute to changes in performance. Just like it would take minutes, hours, or even days for your body to acclimate to standing after lying in bed for weeks, it takes time for an astronaut's body to acclimate to an environment with gravity after working without it for many months. 2 tests will focus on post-flight tasks and procedures that will be vital for an exploration crew that has just landed on a planet after a prolonged period of weightlessness. The functional studies will assess how the neurosensory networks, eye-hand coordination, fluid distribution, cardiovascular, and skeletal muscle performance all work together to accomplish an integrated task or function. Researchers hope to compile a post-flight recovery timeline and develop and validate tests to define acceptable performance and define the linkage between physiological changes and functional capacity. This information will be helpful for astronauts and researchers as they prepare for future long-duration missions to asteroids, Mars, and beyond. To learn more about NASA's Human Research Program, visit www.nasa.gov.
So now let's hear from one of our researchers who is studying the cardiovascular system off the Earth for the Earth.
My name is Stuart Lee. I'm the lead research scientist in the Cardiovascular and Vision Laboratory at Johnson Space Center. So the astronauts in spaceflight is somewhat analogous to if you took one of us on the ground and told us not to exercise for a long period of time. So spaceflight has allowed us to see the deconditioning effects. And we can see all the negative things that can happen when you don't exercise, when you don't do physical work every day that we're actually genetically designed to do. So I would say that cardiovascular health is important from the aspect of the heart and the blood vessels are the communication system in your body. So the experiment that they're demonstrating in the background is the primary measurements in our cardiovascular experiment called CardioOx. And it's primarily looking at the health and function of the arteries in your body. In this particular case, they're scanning the brachial artery, and we use that as a surrogate for the arteries in your heart, the coronary arteries. So we're able to see how they would respond to stress. And obviously, if they respond well, then we've got good cardiovascular health, and it has a good prognosis long-term for the health of the heart. So they're looking specifically at how the vessel expands and contracts with each heartbeat, And then we also we stress the vessel and we see how well it expands. And those are key functions in your ability to adapt to stress when you're exercising or when you're experiencing orthostatic or gravitational stress. And so it gives us a way that we can look at throughout the mission and after the mission how the crew members are responding to the spaceflight experience. So CardioOx is looking primarily at the health and fitness, as you might say, of the arteries. The unique part of CardioOx is we're actually looking at 5 years after the mission. So most experiments just look some in and post-flight. We're actually interested in long-term health of the crew members 5 years later, where their stress is involved with spaceflight, which might have caused some issues for them. Sprint is another experiment that looks at cardiovascular, but it looks primarily at the cardiovascular fitness end of things, how hard you can work. We call it VO2 max or maximal oxygen consumption. How hard you can get your body to work during space. And the VO2 max test is very good because it's an integrative test of the cardiovascular system. It brings together all the function of the cardiovascular system so you can work as hard as possible. So these experiments together give us an idea of what's happening on the functional side of things, the Sprint study, and then on the I don't want to say pathological, but on the health side of things with CardioOx. And then with the CardioOx twins experiment, we're also then looking at how genetics affects those things. My name is Stuart Lee. I'm a lead research scientist in the Cardiovascular and Vision Laboratory at Johnson Space Center. We're working off the Earth for the Earth.
Our International Space Station provides an unprecedented research platform in space, allowing doctors and scientists to conduct science experiments that can't be done anywhere else. For NASA, keeping our astronauts' heart healthy is vital for continuing the journey off the Earth. Here on the Earth, the keys to good heart health are good nutrition and vigorous exercise. Thanks for joining us on StationLIFE at our behind-the-scenes look at cardiovascular research being done aboard the International Space Station. And as always, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest research news, and download our app, which is legit, on your mobile device. Until next time, we're working off the Earth for the Earth.